Once each year, the U.S. president has the opportunity to address the leaders of the world at the annual General Assembly of the United Nations. President Trump spoke at the UN this morning. We'll discuss his powerful and important speech today on End of the Age. Well, what a day packed full of news, the headline news being the speech of President Donald Trump at the United Nations. Before we dive into that, let me briefly tell you where I'm going to be in the future. And this is a little bit ahead of time, but it's important. On the 5th of October, I will be in Great Mills, Maryland. On the 6th of October, Washington, D.C., and then again on the 7th of October, Washington, D.C. We thought we would give you a little bit of a heads-up notice. I know a lot of you like to plan ahead of time. For all the details of that, you can simply go to endtime.com, click on the events button, and then down to conferences, and you can see all the details, the address, all the times, everything that you need to know, but just a little bit of a heads up ahead of time. Now, let's get to this very important thing that happened this morning. Once each year, the nations of the world converge on New York for the annual General Assembly of the United Nations. It is almost always, if not always, the biggest gathering of world leaders in one place. I was privileged to attend the annual meeting of the General Assembly. I think the year I was there were 153 heads of state out of a total of 193. So pretty amazing, actually, when you see all these heads of state come together. Of course, everything is totally blocked off. And in order to get in, you have to have all kinds of advanced clearances, which at that time I did have. So I understand what goes on there. You go through one x-ray machine after another in order to make your way in there to the United Nations. But it's a big event when you can hear heads of state from all over the world speak. Normally they give each of them about 20 minutes apiece to address the world body, and they go all the way through. All the nations of the world are invited to make their presentations. President Donald Trump spoke this morning. Normally, the speech of the U.S. president is one of the highlights of the General Assembly because the United States is the host country since the UN is located here in New York. Consequently, the U.S. president is always given an honored place to welcome the nations of the world to New York City. Well, President Trump spoke for about 35 minutes this morning. I've gone through the entire text of his speech. I listened to it first of all, and then I downloaded the text because I wanted to analyze it. I thought it was a tremendous speech. Typical Trump fashion. He didn't beat around the bush. He confronted things that he thought were wrong. He boasted about some things that had been accomplished, as he is wont to do. Nevertheless, overall, there were no doubts left when he was finished as to exactly where he stood, what he thought about the major things of the world. Now, one of the things that was lacking was much said about the Middle East peace. It originally was rumored that his entire speech would be focused on unveiling his peace plan at the United Nations General Assembly this year, but because things were not to his liking yet, he refrained from doing that, waiting for another time. I want to go through with you, though, because the first thing that President Trump did, he did boast of the accomplishments of the administration in the first 2 years. Here's what he said. In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. Now, at that point, a lot of the delegates began to laugh. Finally, President Trump said, I didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay. So then more laughter, including President Trump himself. It was somewhat of a light moment, and it sort of took some of the tensions out of the air, I think. Nevertheless, President Trump continued, America's economy is booming like never before. Since my election, we've added $10 trillion in wealth. The stock market is at an all-time high in history, and jobless claims are at a 50-year low. African American, Hispanic American, and Asian American unemployment have all achieved their lowest levels ever recorded. We've added more than 4 million new jobs, including 500,000 manufacturing jobs. We have passed the biggest tax cuts and reforms in American history. We've started the construction of a major border wall, and we have greatly strengthened border security. We have secured record funding for our military, $700 billion this year, $716 billion next year. Our military will soon be more powerful than it has ever been. In other words, the United States is stronger, safer, and a richer country than it was when I assumed office less than 2 years ago. So President Trump, yes, he did start off with a little boast, but then he proceeded to back up his words with proof, deeds, and it seemed like it was fairly well accepted. We're going to continue on going through the president's speech as soon as we get back from this short break. Stay with us. It's going to be an exciting day here at End of the Age.
Many Christians admit end-time Bible prophecy is very complex and difficult to understand, and for some, a little bit scary. But what if you could understand Bible prophecy? What if you could know what will happen and how the United States will play a key role during end-time events? When you call today and get Understanding the End Time DVD curriculum, you can have peace about what is to come, while understanding the prophetic events that appear in our headlines every day. When you call or go online to endtime.com and order, you'll learn the answer to the biggest prophecy question of all. Will the rapture take place, and when will it happen? This 14-part DVD series is the definitive end-time prophecy Bible study available. And for this limited time, you can get it for just $149. Don't miss this special offer. Understanding the End Time. Call now, 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME. Or go to endtime.com today.
I have left a piece of my heart in Israel and her people. We would like to thank Endtime for doing such an awesome job with our Israel tour. We marvel at your team keeping the time schedule, keeping everyone comfortable, the wonderful driver, the brilliant guide, the entire tour program, good hotel choices, and stellar food. We had the privilege to rub shoulders with Pastor Baxter, listened to his current teachings, and had some interesting questions answered so eloquently. He is wonderful. Helene from Australia.
Join Irvin and Judy Baxter May 2nd through the 17th, 2019 for the ultimate Israel tour experience with a Greek island cruise. Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 to sign up today.
I'll tell you the truth, I was rather gratified at how our president represented the United States and also represented values that I personally believe in. We're going to cover a lot of those today. One of the first things he did was he addressed the issue of globalism. Now, he ran on this when he was a candidate before ever being elected, but he has not changed his course. Here's what he had to say. That is why America will always choose independence and cooperation over global governance, control, and domination. Now, I was so happy to hear him say this because we are fighting a bitter battle over global governance. Why are people so stressed over Donald Trump? It's because they have been planning to incorporate America into a system of global governance over the last 50 to 100 years. And now he is here to reverse all that, to bring back American sovereignty, and to renounce globalism, which I'm so happy he is, because the Bible prophesies there will be a global government right before the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's going to end up going all wrong. It will end up being a world government, and that world government will ultimately be led by a personage in the Bible called the Antichrist. Now, I believe in sovereignty of nations. I do not believe in global governance, even if there were no prophecies. However, the prophecies, of course, solidify my position down to the core. And when I heard President Trump stand before the United Nations, which was designed to be an instrument of global governance when it was founded in 1945, when he stood there and very boldly said, we will always choose independence over global governance, control, and domination. He went on to say, I honor the right of every nation in this room to pursue its own customs, beliefs, and traditions. The United States will not tell you how to live or work or worship. We only ask that you honor our sovereignty in return. So he started off great addressing that issue. Then he shifted to North Korea. With support from many countries here today, we have engaged with North Korea to replace the specter of conflict with a bold and new push for peace. The missiles and rockets are no longer flying in every direction. Nuclear testing has stopped. Some military facilities are already being dismantled. Our hostages have been released. And as promised, the remains of our fallen heroes are being returned home to lay at rest in American soil. I would like to thank Chairman Kim for his courage and for the steps he has taken, though much work remains to be done. The sanctions will stay in place until denuclearization occurs. Did you notice that after all the commendation, he still draws the line and says the sanctions against North Korea will stay until we actually have bona fide nuclearization. So very important, because a lot of people have been saying, is he going to let those sanctions off before there's actually evidence of denuclearization? And he answered that in no uncertain terms. So he was complimentary. He's hoping to keep the progress on track, and at the same time not yield to the temptation to let up the pressure before denuclearization is actually achieved. He went on to say a special thanks to President Moon of South Korea, Prime Minister Abe of Japan, and President Xi of China. So President Trump is here on the world stage. I mean, think about this. He was a private citizen 2 years ago. Now he's standing before the world stage, and he's speaking to all the leaders of the world, and yet totally unintimidated. He's slowly but surely just laying everything else out there. Then he shifted to the subject of Iran. He said the Iran deal was a windfall for Iran's leaders. In the years since the deal was reached, Iran's military budget grew nearly 40%. Think about that. Since President Obama signed that deal, Iran's military budget grew nearly 40% in about a year or two. The dictatorship used the funds to build nuclear-capable missiles, increasing internal repression, finance terrorism, and fund havoc and slaughter in Syria and in Yemen. Now, did you notice he called Iran a dictatorship? Because that's what it is. The Khomeini, who is the religious leader of Iran, has the power to veto any opposition. So consequently, it is a dictatorship, and President Trump very openly reminded everybody there of that fact. Then he went on to say, we cannot allow the world's leading sponsor of terrorism, that's Iran, to possess the planet's most dangerous weapons. We cannot allow a regime that chants death to America and that threatens Israel with annihilation to possess the means to deliver a nuclear warhead to any city on earth. Just can't do it. We ask all nations to isolate Iran's regime as long as its aggression continues. And we ask all nations to support Iran's people as they struggle to reclaim their religious and righteous destiny. Notice how he draws the line of difference between the regime and the people. He's saying the people would like to have freedom, they would like to have religious freedom, but right now they're caught in the vice of dictatorship. However, we want to weaken the regime while we strengthen the people in their struggle to regain their freedom. If you'll remember the history, Iran was a booming, prosperous, pro-Western power before 1979. It was 1979 that the Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile, making his way back to Iran, marshaled enough interest to overthrow the Shah and usher in a Muslim dictatorship. And that's the way it's been. So here we are almost, 40 years later, and they've lived under this. So President Trump is trying to put all this in perspective in a very straightforward way. Then he turns the attention of his speech to recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Here's what he said. This year, we also took another significant step forward in the Middle East. In recognition of every sovereign state to determine its own capital, I moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Now you got to realize the United Nations fought this tooth and nail. The European Union fought this tooth and nail. And there are still only 3 or 4 other nations that have also now moved their capital of their embassy to Jerusalem. So he's in this room and he's staring down all these leaders and saying, we recognize every sovereign state's ability to determine its own capital, not only ability but right. And he said, consequently, I moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. He went on to say, the United States is committed to a future of peace and stability in the region, including peace between Israelis and the Palestinians. That aim is advanced, not harmed, by acknowledging the obvious facts. In other words, it's such an obvious fact that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. It was its capital from 1000 BC all the way up to 70 AD. And as soon as Israel was reborn in 1948, it became the capital again. It's been that ever since. It's a fact on the ground. The other fact is there's not even a Palestinian nation yet. Never has been a Palestinian nation. And yet they're claiming that they're supposed to have half of Jerusalem as their capital. So anyway, he's saying sometimes you got to deal with reality, not deal with dreams and wannabes. The United States is committed to a future of peace and stability in the region, including peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. That aim is advanced, not harmed, by acknowledging the obvious facts. America's policy of principled realism means we will not be held hostage to old dogmas, discredited ideologies, and so-called experts who have been proven wrong over the years, time and time again. Here's what he's saying. They've been trying to get peace in the Middle East for so many years. And yes, we are taking a different approach, but guess what? Their approach has never worked. Even though they've been trying to get peace since 1948, it hasn't worked. It's time for a new approach. He says, therefore, we're not going to be held hostage to these old dogmas that are discredited, these ideologies. And so consequently, we are, in fact, taking a new approach to peace in the Middle East. Now, that's all he said concerning the Middle East peace situation. He was not ready to fully unveil his plan that he's been working on for the last 16 months, but nevertheless, he did take time to address it to a small extent. Continuing on, he turned his attention to world trade. He said, for decades, the United States opened its economy, the largest by far on earth, with few conditions. We allowed foreign goods from all over the world to flow freely across our borders. Yet, other countries did not grant us fair and reciprocal access to their markets in return. Even worse, some countries abused their openness to dump their products, subsidize their goods, target our industries, and manipulate their currencies to gain unfair advantage over our country. As a result, our trade deficit ballooned to nearly $800 billion a year. Now, let's pause and make sure we all get that. We have been running a trade deficit of $800 billion a year. In order to do that, you have to be losing close to $1 trillion a year. And that happened during the Obama administration. When President Obama took power as president, I think our national debt was around 10 or 11 trillion, and he averaged losing $1 trillion per year. And by the time he left office, we were 20 trillion in debt. So how do you do that? By spending $800 billion more per year than you take in. You run a trade deficit of $800 billion. And this is exactly what President Trump is pointing out in his speech. He goes on to say, for this reason, we are systematically renegotiating broken and bad trade deals. Last month, we announced a groundbreaking U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. And just yesterday, I stood with President Moon to announce the successful completion of the brand new U.S.-Korea trade deal. And this is just the beginning. Then continuing, he dwelt more on the trade deficit because this is so vital. He said the United States lost over 3 million manufacturing jobs, nearly a quarter of all steel jobs, and 60,000 factories after China joined the WTO, the World Trade Organization. And we have racked up 13 trillion in trade deficits over the last 2 decades. But those days are over, President Trump said. Those days are over. We will no longer tolerate such abuse. We will not allow our workers to be victimized, our companies to be cheated, and our wealth to be plundered and transferred. America will never apologize for protecting its citizens. The United States has just announced tariffs on another $200 billion in Chinese-made goods for a total so far of $250 billion. I have great respect and affection for my friend President Xi, that's the president of China, but I have made clear our trade imbalance is just not acceptable. China's market distortions and the way they deal cannot be tolerated. So here he is in front of the whole world taking on China, and the Chinese leaders are sitting right there in front of him, but he is not mincing any words. He went on to say, we have now quit the Human Rights Council. He said, I spoke before this body last year and warned that the UN Human Rights Council had become a grave embarrassment to this institution, shielding egregious human rights abusers while bashing America and its many friends. Our ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, laid out a clear agenda for reform, but despite reported and repeated warnings, no action at all was taken, so the United States took the only responsible course. We withdrew from the Human Rights Council, and we will not return until real reform is enacted. Now, this next part of the speech, and I'm just about to run out of time in this segment, but I want to get this one in. President Trump devoted to the International Criminal Court. He said, for similar reasons, the United States will provide no support in recognition to the International Criminal Court. As far as America is concerned, the ICC has no jurisdiction, no legitimacy, and no authority. The ICC claims near universal jurisdiction over the citizens of every country, violating all principles of justice, fairness, and due process. We will never surrender America's sovereignty to an unelected, unaccountable, global bureaucracy. America is governed by Americans. We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism. Wow, what a stance he's taken, and I'm sent back here saying, amen. Well, anyway, he went on to say, around the world, responsible nations must defend against threats to sovereignty, not just from global governance, but also from other new forms of coercion and domination. Then he turned and he attacked the high oil prices. He said oil prices must be lowered. OPEC and OPEC nations are, as usual, ripping off the rest of the world, and I don't like it. Nobody should like it. We defend many of these nations for nothing, and then they take advantage of us by giving us high oil prices. Not good. We want them to stop raising prices. We want them to start lowering prices, and they must contribute substantially to military protection from now on. We are not going to put up with it, these horrible prices, much longer. So here you can see that President Trump is mincing no words. And finally, he moved on to Germany. He said there, Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change its course. And of course, he's letting everybody know that America has become the world's #1 producer of energy. And of course, they can buy energy from us. After all, we've been defending them since World War II. So that's I'll be finishing in our next segment the rest of the speech and its analysis, but so far, so good. As you can see, if you're a believer in national sovereignty, if you're a believer in not submitting to world government, then this speech was certainly for you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's simply say this. If you're not yet a partner with Endtime Ministries, this fight is not over. There is going to be a global government. The Bible prophesies it. But we're going to resist it. America's going to resist it, thank God. If you'd like to know more or be a partner with Endtime Ministries, call us. The number to call, 1-800-END-TIME.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Order this brand new book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
As President Trump continued his speech at the UN this morning, he addressed illegal immigration. Here's what he had to say. Illegal immigration funds criminal networks, ruthless gangs, and the flow of deadly drugs. Illegal immigration exploits vulnerable populations, hurts hardworking citizens, and has produced a vicious cycle of crime, violence, and poverty. Only by up national borders, destroying criminal gangs, can we break this cycle and establish a real foundation for prosperity. We recognize the right of every nation in this room to set its own immigration policy in accordance with its national interest, just as we ask other countries to respect our own right to do the same, which we are doing. That is one reason the United States will not participate in the new global compact on migration. Migration should not be governed by an international body unaccountable to our own citizens. I mean, here he stands. He's not following, he is leading. And that's so refreshing. Then he moved to socialism. Currently, we are witnessing a human tragedy. As an example, in Venezuela, more than 2 million people have fled the anguish inflicted by the socialist Maduro regime and its Cuban sponsors. Not long ago, Venezuela was one of the richest countries on earth. Today, socialism has bankrupted the oil-rich nation and driven its people into abject poverty. Virtually everywhere socialism or communism has been tried, it has produced suffering, corruption, and decay. Socialism's thirst for power leads to expansion, incursion, and oppression. All nations of the world should resist socialism and the misery that it brings to everyone. Now, remember, Venezuela was one of the wealthiest nations on earth, and my understanding is they still have some of the world's greatest oil reserves, and yet the people are starving today because of this horrible specter of socialism. President Trump is addressing the nations of the world, most of which are socialist. You've heard all about the socialist wave and how that the theory of socialism has infiltrated our college campuses until most of our graduates from our colleges here in America come out and say they favor socialism over capitalism. It's because they have been brainwashed. It's because it's not, socialism doesn't work. And President Trump is taking it on head to head, as well he should. I am so grateful he's willing to do that. Then foreign aid. Moving forward, we are only going to give foreign aid to those who respect us and, frankly, are our friends. And we expect other countries to pay their fair share for the cost of their defense. Then he said, I have told our negotiators that the United States will not pay more than 25% of the UN peacekeeping budget. Now, to me, 25% is a lot. When you got 193 nations and you have one nation paying 25%, is that even fair? Nevertheless, apparently we're paying more than that right now. So he said we're only going to pay 25% of the UN's peacekeeping budget. Now he moves to sovereign and independent nations. To unleash this incredible potential in our people, we must defend the foundations that make it all possible. Sovereign and independent nations are the only vehicle where freedom has ever survived, democracy has ever endured, or peace has ever prospered. And so, we must protect our sovereignty and our cherished independence above all. He was wrapping up, and then finally he signed off. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless the nations of the world. That was the speech of your president today. I didn't give it all to you, of course, but I did go over many of the main points because I was so thankful that he so stoutly defended national sovereignty and so strongly criticized socialism. So many good things here, and so eloquently stated in terms that anybody could understand, and I do not know how anyone could disagree with it. Anyway, that's the sum total of what happened there at the United Nations today. Of course, there are so many things going on, so many other speakers at the UN. I have not heard their speeches, haven't had time to do all of that. Nevertheless, I thought you would like to hear what your president had to say at the UN General Assembly today. All right, we are going to come to your calls now. If you'd like to be on the air with me, if you have questions to ask, the number to call is 877-END-TIME, 877-363-8463. If you'd like to reach our operators and become a partner with Endtime Ministries, we got a big job to do. And we need your help, and God needs your help, but you also will be blessed. You cannot give without being blessed. It's a law. I mean, so many times the selfishness that's inherent in all of us will think, oh, I can't give this or I can't give that. But the truth of the matter is, the Bible says, given it shall be given to you, and it'll be given to you greater back than you received. Now, again, I'm just telling you what the Bible says and what I have found to be true in my life. I don't ever think I've upped the amount of my contributions to the work of God without receiving a greater increase in my income. It happens. It's been happening since I remember when I was, my first job, I was working at the insurance company of North America, and I was bringing home a whopping $50 a week. Can you believe that? Now, that was, of course, 50 years ago. But $50 a week wasn't even that much 50 years ago. So we were living on shoestring, and yet we had a standard that we always paid our tithing plus another 5% in the offering. And I didn't want to compromise that, so we just kept doing it. And we always made it. And then God helped us, and things got better, and things got better. And anyway, God has been so good. I'm just simply telling you that if you need financial counseling, the way to be blessed of God is simple. Give, it shall be given to you. It's a promise from God. He will never break, ever break. And so I've watched it. Anyway, I'm not begging you for money today. I'm just simply saying, if you would like to be a partner, please jump on board. We do need you. We need to expand Endtime exponentially, because the Endtime is coming at us like a big freight train coming right down the track. And so we're hurrying with all of our might. Anyway, to be on the air with me, 877-Endtime, to call our operator, 800-Endtime. And let's go ahead and get to the phone right now. Eric's calling from Texas. Hello, Eric.
How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a real quick question. You brought up Iran's budget. You know that Iran's budget is not even a tenth of the United States military budget? That the United States spends more than 70 countries combined on military budget. What do you think of that?
Yes, I know that is true. And the reason we have such a huge military budget is because without the United States, the world would probably be totally a communistic world government right now. So the United States is basically cast in the role of being the defender of freedom around the world. So you're right about that.
There's a constitution that says we have to be the defenders of freedom in the world. In fact, I go by what Smedley Butler said. We shouldn't go 500 nautical miles past our borders.
Okay, Eric, you're blurring on me a little bit, so I only got a little bit of that last statement. And you know, really, I would pray that America would become such a godly nation that God would preserve us and we would never have to go to war. I am not a warmonger whatsoever. I would never want to kill anyone. That's the way I feel about it. Nevertheless, that's not the world in which we live right now. I'm very sorry to say, of course. Well, listen, thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for the phone call. And we do spend a huge amount on defense right now. And I wish we didn't have to do that. Let's go now to a Facebook viewer. Julie wants to know, was the peace plan discussed at the assembly? Not really. At least unless it was on the sidelines, of course. I do know that President Trump was meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. either this afternoon. I think it was scheduled for this afternoon. He also was to meet with the Egyptian President al-Sisi. There's nothing said about him possibly meeting with Mahmoud Abbas. I'm sure if that happens, it will soon be reported in Technicolor. But as of right now, I think Trump would be willing to do it. But Abbas has said, I don't want to meet with you because Trump is not putting up with the chase your tail type of negotiation. I mean, how long has this negotiation been going on? Ever since 1948. And it happened during the Ford administration, during the Carter administration, during the Clinton administration, for both Bushes, Obama, and it seems like we're still stuck right where we are. Well, then all of a sudden Trump comes along and he says, I'm not playing that game anymore. You know, one thing that happened back in 2007, Ehud Olmert, the prime minister of Israel at the time, offered to go all the way back to 67 borders, give Abbas and the Palestinians East Jerusalem as their capital, including the Temple Mount. He virtually was willing to give everything back. Can you believe Abbas turned him down? Yet he says he wants peace. He'll never get a deal like that again. So because this has happened, many people have concluded that he doesn't want peace. All he wants to do is wear away at Israel until Israel finally is no more. Well, President Trump is saying, we're tired of playing that game. And if you don't want peace, maybe there even needs to be a regime change. He went ahead and moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Now then, he's cutting their income. And he just within the last couple of weeks kicked the Palestinian headquarters that they have established, their diplomatic residence in Washington, D.C. He just ordered that closed and ordered their visas rescinded. The representative of the Palestinians as well as his family have to be out of the country within 30 days. And so Trump is saying, look, if you're going to kick me in the teeth and say you don't even want to meet with my vice president, you don't want to meet with my peace emissaries, you do not want to meet with me, then we're not giving you any money. We're going to cut it off. And so far, he's cut off hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't have the exact figures in front of me right now, but it's been hundreds of millions of dollars, because if Abbas doesn't want peace, then I think the decision's already been made to replace him. And America has the leverage, along with the other nations around there, between America, Israel, and some nations like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt. I believe that they could flip Mahmoud Abbas and throw him out of office within a matter of months. So I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. All I'm saying is that that's part of what's going on here. But no, the peace agreement was not discussed. It would have been, except Mahmoud Abbas continues to say we're not interested whatsoever. So anyway, that's what's going on. All right, we want to get right back to the phones now. Well, we won't. We'll wait for this break, and then when we get back, we'll continue. We do have some open lines. The number to call, 877-END-TIME, 877-363-8463. To reach our operators, well, that number is 800-END-TIME. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to End of the Age, and guess what? The end time is now.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
And by the way, everything I quoted to you from President Trump's speech, I downloaded off of Politico.com. They have there a transcript, a word-for-word transcript of his speech. And so everything that I read to you was taken straight from the words of our president. Just wanted you to know. Let's get right back to the phones. Katie is calling from right here in Texas. Hi, Katie.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Well, I just wanted to call and thank you for how you have just blessed me by telling me and informing me on what happened with the president's speech, because I'm not computer literate and I don't get to see a lot of that stuff, but you have explained it so well that it just encouraged me, and I just want to take time to thank you for that and to tell you that I'm going to be sending a little something for your ministry each month.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for the nice comments. And thank you for all that you do. We appreciate it very much. And it's just a privilege to do what we do.
Yes. Well, thank you kindly, and that's all I need. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.
Katie left us there. Anyway, thanks a lot, Katie. I appreciate it so much. Let's go now, again in Texas, to James. Hello, James.
Hello?
You're on the air.
Hello, Irvin. It's your lucky day. Do you have any doubts whether President Trump is the one of the anointed witnesses now? Anyway, I wanted to tell you that I know of the Antichrist and what the number 666 means. And my name is James the Supplanter, just in case you want to know. Anyway, 666 means if you take 6 plus 6 plus 6 equals 18. This is when this person started becoming famous. Now, here's the thing. Right now, when Israel had their big celebration of 70 years, the Antichrist is also 70 years old, believe it or not. Now, here's another thing. You know how it says in the trumpets how 1/3 of the grass and the trees were burned up? This was bad. 1/3 of the ships in the second trumpet was bad because they sank, okay? You keep going on. There's 1/3, 1/3. All these 1/3s are bad. 1/3 of the population is going to be killed in 6 trumpet war. Okay. Now you get to the end times. Anyway, when the Antichrist comes to power, you have a 1,000-year, it's like one day is 1,000 years in this sort of speech you hear. Okay, you take 1,000 minus 333, and what do you get? If you minus it by 1/3, you get 666. So that's the number of the Antichrist. So the Antichrist will actually be in power.
James, I'm afraid you're sort of losing our audience here. I hear what you're saying. How you determine the Antichrist is 70 years of age. I think that's pretty arbitrary. I don't know that there's any Bible proof for that. Nevertheless, we've heard you. I'm going to move on now. Thank you very much for your phone call. We appreciate it. I'll tell you what I want to do in a little bit of time we have left. Another article appeared in the Jerusalem Post yesterday, Trump's scorched earth tactics and the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Just a few things I thought you would like to know. As regarding the Palestinians, however, the situation is completely different. Never since the signing of the Oslo Accords 25 years ago, that happened in 1993, has a U.S. president been as heavy-handed in his approach to the Palestinian Authority, which includes the American recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the cut-off of billions of dollars of American aid, including to the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, also known as UNRWA, a move viewed as a prelude to ending any prospect of a Palestinian right of return to Israel, and more recently, the shuttering of the Palestinian mission in Washington. Okay, let me pause to tell you what they're actually speaking of here. First of all, he points out, and this article was written, I believe, by, I think it was written by Danny Ayalon. I don't have that in front of me, but nevertheless, he's pointing out that America's recognized Jerusalem as the capital, which was considered probably the number one point of dispute. And number two, we are taking away support. The Palestinian refugees have been living on welfare since 1948. And we're saying, look, you guys go get a job. We're not going to support you forever. And so they have been happily living off of American welfare all this time. But now then President Trump is cutting that off, saying it's time to end this foolishness. Plus, they have created a myth because there were only between 20 and 40,000 refugees. But they now puffed that up to 5 million. How have they done that? Well, all those refugees had children, and they had children, and they had children. And so they said anybody who's an offspring of a refugee is also a refugee. And so they kept adding them to the welfare rolls, and you have been supporting them through your tax dollars, through the United States government, and through the United Nations. So anyway, now then, Danny Ayalon is saying, look, President Trump is taking a whole different approach. All the rest of the presidents have accepted this as normal, but now then he's saying, we're not doing this anymore. And then the latest thing is, again, Mahmoud Abbas hurled some insulting words at President Trump. And so President Trump said, look, you're not welcome in our country anymore. And so they closed down the Palestinian mission. It was a week or two ago. Continuing on, indeed, there has been a dramatic shift in focus onto the Palestinians' perceived obstructionism, including Ramallah's where they have their headquarters, out-of-hand rejection of the White House yet unveiled peace proposal, and historically, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas' refusal to engage in any meaningful negotiations, as evidenced by his failure to respond to then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's offer in 2008, which I mentioned earlier, to create a Palestinian state in virtually all of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with the eastern part of Jerusalem as its capital. Even though President Trump has all the while expressed a willingness to reverse course should Abbas agree to play ball, it is becoming apparent that the administration is willing to take things to a point of no return. As such, many observers are highlighting the danger of using scorched earth tactics in an inherently unstable and volatile process. That is, unless Washington and Jerusalem, with the backing of Arab nations, are prepared to unilaterally introduce completely new variables into the equation at the risk of sidelining Abbas completely and accept the resulting consequences. So, Danny Ayalon is simply saying, look, Trump means business. He's doing something nobody else has ever done. I mean, he's willing to even sideline Abbas, apparently. And it looks that way to me, too. Anyway, the article went on to say the peace process has been mired in seemingly immutable orthodoxies for decades, and while breaking things is generally viewed as counterproductive, it may be needed at this stage. And finally, Danny Ayalon, a former Israeli deputy prime minister and ambassador to Washington, believes that while it is too early to determine the effectiveness of the new American policy, one thing is for certain. For a quarter century, American presidents have tried everything besides this, and it was a total failure. Palestinian intransigence was overlooked, and this led to the Palestinian Authority becoming more entrenched in its positions. And finally, the article says, in this event, the PA may still be unreceptive, with Abbas suggesting on Friday during a visit to France that he will only re-enter peace talks within an internationalized framework, perhaps under the mediation of the quartet, consisting of the European Union, the United Nations, Russia, and the United States of America. So that's where we are right now. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're in different territory. President Trump has this peace deal done. It's ready to be presented. But Abbas has his arms folded and his eyes closed and saying, don't even talk to me. So what's going to happen? Now, don't forget this. We do have the power to remove Mahmoud Abbas from power. His two main sources of income are the United States and the taxes Israel collects and then passes on to him. If those two income streams dry up, Mr. Abbas is out of business. I don't know what's going to happen. I think already Mr. Abbas is feeling the pinch. I read an article last week stating he's now instructed those around him, listen, let's quit insulting Mr. Trump because he's up in the ante so fast, we may not want to pay the price of the next thing he does to us. So let's sort of go on to our best behavior here. Now, Mr. Abbas, I think, is going to be speaking at the United Nations. He may have already done it by now. I haven't had time to go back and read all those speeches yet. Nevertheless, I do know he was sitting in the audience while President Trump was making his speech today. The cameras turned and focused on him. So there's high stakes at the United Nations. It's not impossible that they can have a secret meeting on a side room somewhere between himself and President Trump. Okay, I don't know for sure what to tell you as to how this is all going to work out, but here's what I do know for sure. The Bible prophesies there is going to be a peace agreement. And it's also one of the only prophecies we have with a specific date attached to it. Most prophecies are sort of thrown out there and you got to figure out when they're going to happen. But this prophecy says that when the Antichrist confirms Israel's right to exist in the Holy Land, in other words, they come to an agreement, yes, you have a right to be here, we recognize you. When that happens, there will be 7 years left to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ to this earth. We know that this topic is hot, hot, hot right now. I will be surprised if we don't see major developments over the next short time. I will be surprised. I think we're getting ready to see a breakthrough. We could see an agreement in the next 6 months or 12 months, but that's not a prediction. I don't know. All I can tell you is there is going to be an agreement. It's going to trigger the final 7 years. Once this agreement is made within the first 3.5 years, first of all, the agreement is going to provide for the sharing of the Temple Mount between Muslims and Jews, and the Jews will be given a place to build their temple back. And when they do that, they will start animal sacrifice again. I mean, these are going to be big, big developments. You will see them on television and all the news media. You'll be watching the building of Israel's first temple in 2,000 years. Well, the agreement that opens the door for that is going to happen 7 years before the second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. So this is so absolutely important. We have a college. It's called Jerusalem Prophecy College. If you go through this college, you'll know more about Bible prophecy than 95% of the graduates from theological seminary. If you'd like to explore, go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com, then register, then get enrolled in your first course. I think everybody should do it. Because if you don't do it, you're operating blind in the most critical times in the history of the world. One more time, JerusalemProphecyCollege.com. God bless you all. See you tomorrow.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.